This next chapter is The Professor Part 2. The Maury I knew, the Maury so many others knew, would not have been the man he was without the years he spent working at a mental hospital just outside Washington, D.C., a place with the deceptively peaceful name Chestnut Lodge. It was one of Maury's first jobs after plowing through a master's degree and a PhD from the University of Chicago. Having rejected medicine, law, and business, Maury had decided the research world would be a place where he could contribute without exploiting others. Maury was given a grant to observe mental patients and record their treatments. While the idea seems common today, it was groundbreaking in the early 50s. Maury saw patients who would scream all day, patients who would cry all night, patients soiling their underwear, patients refusing to eat, having to be held down, medicated, and fed intravenously. One of the patients, a middle aged woman, came out of her room every day and laid face down on the tile floor, and she stayed there for hours. As doctors and nurses stepped around her, Maury watched in horror. He took notes, which is what he was there to do. Every day she did the same thing. Came out in the morning, laid on the floor, stayed there until the evening, talking to no one, ignored by everyone. It saddened Maury. He began to sit on the floor with her, even laying down alongside her, trying to draw her out of her misery. Eventually, he got her to sit up and even to return to her room. When she mostly wanted, he learned, was the same thing that many people want, someone to notice that she was there. Maury worked at Chestnut Lodge for 5 years. Although it wasn't encouraged, he befriended some of the patients, including a woman who joked with him about how lucky she was to be there. Because my husband is so rich, he can afford it. Can you imagine if I had to be in one of those cheap mental hospitals? Another woman who would spit at everyone else took to Maury and called him her friend. They talked each day, and the staff was at least encouraged that someone had gotten through to her. But one day she ran away, and Maury was asked to help bring her back. They tracked her down in a nearby store, hiding in the back, and when Maury went to her, she burned an angry look at him. So you're one of them too, she snarled. One of who? My jailers. Maury observed that most of the patients there had been rejected and ignored in their lives, made to feel like they didn't exist. They also missed compassion, something the staff ran out of quickly, and many of those patients were well off from rich families, so their wealth did not buy them happiness or contentment. It was a lesson that he never forgot. I used to tease Maury that he was stuck in the 60s. He would answer that the 60s weren't that bad compared to the times we live in now. He came to Brandeis after his work in the mental health field, just before the 60s began. Within a few years, the campus became a hotbed for cultural revolution. Drugs, sex, race, Vietnam protest. Abby Hoffman attended Brandeis. So did Jerry Rubin and Angela Davis. Maury had many of the radical students in his class. That was partly because instead of simply teaching, the sociology faculty got involved. It was fiercely anti war, for example. When the professors learned that the students who did not maintain a certain GPA average would lose their deferments and be drafted, they decided not to give any grades. When the administration said, if you don't give those students grades, they will all fail, Maury had a solution. Let's give them all A's. And they did. Just as the 60s opened up the campus, it also opened up the staff in Maury's department. From the and sandals now, uh, jeans and sandals they now wore when working to their view of the classroom as a living, breathing place. They chose discussions over lectures, experiences over theory. They sent students to the deep south for civil rights projects and the inner city for field work. They went to Washington for protest marches, and Maury often rode the bus with his students. On one trip, he watched with gentle amusement as women in flowing skirts and love beads put flowers in soldiers' guns, and then sat on the lawn holding hands, trying to levitate the Pentagon. They didn't move it, he later recalled, but it was a nice try. One time, a group of black students took over Ford Hall on the Brandeis campus, draping it in a banner that read Malcolm X University. Ford Hall had chemistry tables, and some administration officials worried that these radicals were making bombs in the basement. Maury knew better. He saw right to the core of the problem, which was human beings wanting to feel that they mattered. The standoff lasted weeks, and it might have gone on longer if Maury hadn't been walking by the building when one of the protesters recognized him as the favorite teacher and yelled for him to come in through the window. An hour later, Maury crawled out through the window with a list of what the protesters wanted. He took the list to the university president, and the situation was then diffused. Maury was always good at peace. At Brandeis, he taught classes about social psychology, mental illness and health, group process, and they were light on the word I'm sorry. And they rely on what you'd now call career skills and heavy on personal development. And because of this, business and law students today might look at Maury as foolishly naive about their contributions. How much money did his students go on to make? How many big time cases did they win? Then again, how many business or law students ever visit their old professors once they leave? Maury's students did that all the time. And in their final months, they came back. And in his final months, they came back to him, hundreds of them from Boston, New York, California, and London. I'm so sorry, and Switzerland. From corporate offices and inner city school programs, they called, they wrote, they drove hundreds of miles for a visit, a word, a smile. I've never had another teacher like you, they all said. Here's the flashback. As my visits with Maury go on, I began to read about death and how different cultures view the final passage. There's a tribe in the North American Arctic, for example, who believe that all things on earth have a soul that exists in a miniature form of the body that holds it. So that a deer has a tiny deer inside and a man has a tiny man inside. And when the large being dies, that the tiny form lives on. It can slide into something being born nearby, or it can go to a temporary resting place in the sky, in the belly of a great feminine spirit, where it waits until the moon can send it back to earth. Sometimes they say the moon is so busy with the new souls that the world that it disappears from the sky. And that is why we have moonless nights. But in the end, the moon always returns, as do we all. That is what they believe.